In this tutorial, I'll show you how to build a low polygon house. I'm going to start off with a polygon cube, like so, and I'm just going to scale this up to make the rough sort of shape of the house I want, using the grid as the floor. What you can do is move the pivot down so it's snapped to the floor. So I'm going to press the insert key. I can move the pivot up and down. If I hold the V key down, V for vertex, and do that, you can see it snaps in line with relevant vertices. So look, that's at the base now. Press the insert key again to go back to pivot mode. It just makes it a little bit easier to pivot it from the floor. So I'm going to make it roughly this shape. I'm going to pick this top face. I'm going to extrude it. So I'm going to use on my poly modeling shelf. I'm using this icon here. You can use the shift key if you like, but it's best to be cautious with extrudes in case you end up with polygons on top of polygons. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to carefully scale this out like so. And you can see it looks a little bit weird because there's a big polygon that we've extruded and we've scaled it out, but then I'm going to extrude it again and drag it up like so. So it's made like the eaves of the house, like so. So it's just extruded one out and pulled it up. Then I'm going to do one more extrude, pull that up like so, and this is going to be the roof. Okay, lots of different ways of doing this. I'm just going to then use the target weld tool, which is this icon here, and I'm going to target weld, drag this across to here, and drag this one across to here, like so. And then just in edge mode, I can pick that edge there and just move it across. If I want to get it exactly precise, look, X, I can just grid snap this so I can get it dead center like that. So V for vertex snap, and X for grid snap. Okay, so we've got the basic sort of shape of our house we want. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a floor base and a little sort of veranda porch thing here. So I'm going to use the multi-cut tool and hold the control key. I'm going to click there. I'm going to click there, and again, just holding the control key all the time to create edge loops. I'm going to press Q to go back to selection mode. Pick that face and that face. W to bring up my tool. So look, those faces there. I'm then going to hold Shift and extrude those out. It's about like that. That'll be absolutely fine. So I'm trying to build this nice and neatly. Okay, so everything's kind of joined together. I'm going to try and remove any end-sided polys and stuff like that, and I'm going to delete any faces that are not needed. So this face and this face. So I've just selected those in face mode and pressed delete. I don't need any floor planes that are not going to be visible. Okay, so and it helps me see inside the house if I build any sort of interior stuff. Right, I'm going to do a doorway now. This will be a little bit more complicated. I'm going to do it very much sort of hands-on, just using the extrude tool. So look, I'm going to pick this face here. I'm going to extrude, and I'm going to scale it in like so. Carefully, look, these little boxes are the things that I'm picking. So I'm going to make it like a saloon door. Now we see here's an issue. If I sort of put this down on floor level, I'm hiding this polygon here, which I don't like. It will cause weird shading and it's not neat polygon modeling. So the best way to do it is get rid of it. So go into edge mode. I can click on that edge and I can press delete and I can delete that edge. Okay, I'm then going to pick this face here. I'm going to press the W key and I'm going to hold V again as I drag up and down, and it should snap it in line with those vertices there. If I drag it over, look, if I drag my cursor over there, look, it snaps it nicely in line. I've got V held down all the time, and that's vertex snapped that edge in line with this vertex here, so it gets that floor plane nice and flat. Now we've got a big end-sided poly here. Look, it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 faces. We will sort that out in a bit, but I want to put a door frame in first. Okay, so I'm going to pick this face again. I'm going to extrude it out. I'm going to just hold Shift down like that. I'm then going to scale it in. Whenever I scale, I always use the actual extrude icon, like so. So I'm just going to carefully select that and scale it in like so. And then press W again, Shift and scale it in. Okay, so I kind of made a door frame here. And again, we've got the same problem arising under here. We've got like a face on top of a face underneath our polygon here. So I'm going to clean it up. First of all, I'm going to just delete this face so I can see exactly what I'm doing, like so. And then I'm just going to have a look in here and see what's going on here. So I'm going to delete that face. I'm going to delete that face. And I think that is okay. So if I select that edge there, okay, and I V-snap that down again. So just snap that down, hold V down, and then hover, go and drag over the vertex you want to align it with. Should have done the back one as well. I could have done that as a face, but look, I'll do each edge individually is fine. So V again in line with that. That's good. And I can then just fill this big space here, because I've got no faces on top of faces. Everything's nice and clean. Everything's sort of facing the right way. I hope that kind of makes sense. I'm going to go to edge mode. I'm going to double click on this edge, and it shows it's nice and neat. By double clicking on it, it's selected all of the edges around that, and then I can go to mesh and fill hole, and that fills that hole, and it's done a good job of it actually. I can then draw in some of the edges now. I'm not going to get rid of all of the end-sided polys, but I'm going to just draw in some, because I'm going to use the multi-cut tool. Carefully hover over the vertex you want to snap to until it goes red. It's got to go red. If it's yellow, it's going to be putting in another vertex. Or if you're not quite on the vertex, it will draw another vertex very close. So make sure it goes red. Then we can go over here, and then again make sure it goes red, and then press enter. We do the same over this side. We could have symmetry on, but I haven't at the moment. I'm going to click on that one, and then click on this one, and press enter again. So that's cleaned it up a little bit. I think this is still an end-sided poly, but we're going to put a center line in at some point. So I'm going to press Q just to cancel the multi-cut tool and go back to my selection tool. What we could do at this point is we could actually make an interior for this. A lot of the times when I'm working with animation, I have separate interiors and use camera cuts when I'm going in and out of buildings. But let's have a go at making an interior for this. So look, I'm going to pick this face here. I'm kind of looking inside the model. So deleting those bottom planes is quite nice, because you can then see inside your model. I'm then going to just make sure this is pulled back enough inside that interior wall, like so. Then I'm going to use the extrude tool. I'm going to scale it out this way, and it looks a bit weird because I haven't given it any space yet, so the faces here are kind of on top of each other. Then I'm going to do one more extrude, and I'm going to drag it back like this, and make sure it's within. I'm trying to make it like a wall thickness here, so you don't want to be pulling it through like that. So something like that should be fine. I'm fairly happy with that. And then if I go into wireframe, I can just see inside. Let's pick that. Not that face, sorry, that face there. Whoops, don't press that key. That was the 3 key, which jelly molded my model. I don't want it to be doing that. And let's just pull that one up for the ceiling. So we've got this kind of interior now for our building. So if we go inside, look, we can see that. And then we've got an end-sided poly on the floor. Let's see if we can get rid of that. So using the multi-cut tool, that's gone red. Click over there, press enter. Oh, it hasn't drawn it. Let me just double check there's no issue there. Have I got a hidden edge? If it doesn't do that, it sometimes means there's an issue. So let's have a look inside this. I won't crack this. I'll show you what might have happened. So if I go to edge mode here, I'm just going to pull this edge back. Yeah, I've got something hidden in there. Let me have a look. Let's just pull this back. Yeah, look, there it is. When I did that extrude, I've obviously got an extra extrude in there, this edge here. So look, if I just delete that edge there, if I just press delete, and then I pick that edge there, highlighting that, and again using the V key, let's just put it in line with that vertex over there. That should be okay now. That should be, I'm getting a bit confused inside this building. Let's try and get back inside. And I just want to check this edge here. I think this edge here is fine. Yeah, that's all right. So yeah, be careful. If the multi-cut tool doesn't work, invariably it means there might be a double edge there. So obviously when I did my extrude, I left an extra edge in there. So yeah, let's see if this works now. It should work. Yeah, it works fine. So just always be aware of that. If the multi-cut tool doesn't work, you're trying to draw edges in and it doesn't work, have a little look at the edges, pull them about, make sure there's nothing hidden in there. And you can see this is nice and neat. We've got a quad here, 2 triangles there. Absolutely fine using triangles with low poly modeling. Not an issue at all. It's best to have triangles rather than end-sided polys. Now what we want to do is put some windows in this as well. I'm going to use a tool that I don't often use actually. I never used to like this tool. It's called the boolean tool, but it's actually quite good with stuff like this. You could, extrude this face here and extrude the one on the inside and then sort of cut a hole in them and join them up. But I think the boolean will actually do a reasonable job if we build a cube and intersect it. So first of all, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to object mode. Look, I've built up a whole stack of history here. So I'm going to delete my history using the little clock icon here just to clean the model up. You can see I've got a little bit of transform data in here, so I'm going to freeze its transformations. And at this point, I would probably save my model. Make sure you keep what you're working on and keep saving in case it ever crashes, obviously. So let's try and build a window. So I'm going to make a cube. Let's just pull that cube out. Let's turn on wireframe so I can just see my model a bit better, so it's not just a big grey mess. And let's scale this out to make a sort of window shape, like so. Something like that's a bit big, isn't it? And we'll put that through the window, making sure it's sticking right the way through, like I can see that on the inside. And we'll try a boolean. And booleans are, you've got to select the right things in the right order. Okay, so we have to pick that, and then I think we pick that, and we go to mesh, boolean, options. Let me just tear this tab off, and I think it's difference we want. Yeah, that's done a good job. I mean, I need to draw an edge in there, probably on the inside. But that's not too bad. But what I actually want a window frame around that as well. So I'm just going to undo that, and I'm going to pull this shape out like so, and I'm going to turn this into like a window frame. So I'm going to make a duplicate of this object, and I'm just going to scale it up a bit so we can see I've got this object on top of this one, and I'm going to scale it down, and I'm just going to have a look at this in my front view. Again, I'm going to turn the wireframe on so I can see exactly what I'm doing. So this is going to be like a window frame, so I just want to scale it in. That'll do. I'm just doing it by sight. And then look, we're boolean those two. Let's see if we can get this the right way around. Difference, yeah, difference has worked. So that's going to be my window frame. I'll delete any history of this object, just in case it causes any complications. I am going to just tidy this up a little bit. So I'm just using the multi-cut tool to put an edge in there and an edge in there, and I'll spin it around and do the same on the back. There and there. Ooh, try that one again. There. Okay, again, deleting history, go back to object mode, delete that history off it. And let's get this positioned how we want it through our window. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to have a look at the inside, because the inside's hard to work on, so I'll just make sure this is just sticking through enough. That's good. And this side, I'm just going to go into vertex or face mode, and I'll just drag those in so it's not extruding too much. So that's cool. And is that in the right position? Let's just pick that and have a look. Oh, that will do, yeah. I can always muck about that later on. So in object mode, and this might need a little bit of tidying up. It might not work first time. There might be some options I could muck about with. But we'll try a difference on this. Ooh, it's done something a bit weird there, isn't it? Let's try a union. I think that's done what I want it to do. Yeah, that's combine the two objects together. So I'm going to stick with that because that's still a lot quicker than the other way. So look, I'm going to go to my poly modeling shelf again and delete my history. And I'm going to delete these middle faces. There's going to probably be two faces here back to back. Look there now. And look, we've got this gap here. We can merge this edge together. I double click on that and double click on that in edge mode. And then I go to edit mesh and merge. And look, the tolerance is a bit low. So if I just drag left and right on this, there we go. And that snapped it together. Just up the tolerance so the merge will merge things together that are further apart than it would by default. And then just click off and go back to object mode. And I think that's all right. That's a lot quicker than extruding on both sides. I'm going to tidy this up very quickly using the multi-cut. So a little red dot up to there. So that makes a quad there and a quad there. And a little red dot down to there. And the tricky bit going inside to do it is always a little bit fiddly. So there to there. And this will get you used to your navigation keys. There to there. That's good. I think that's all nice and neat. Right, so we've got this window in here. We've got this edge here is quite good because we could easily snap another polygon in there. We could make a poly face using the poly face tool and snap another one in there, which would be quite good. And then put transparency on it if we wanted to. So that's working quite nicely. Again, we could use the boolean to put a window up here and windows all around it kind of thing. I just want to show you how to put a center line in and also how to then mirror the object, because what I should have probably done when doing the boolean is maybe had symmetry on or something like that, but I didn't. So I want to show you also using boolean. I don't know whether symmetry works particularly well with boolean. You need two objects and stuff like that. So using the mirror tool and cutting objects in half is quite a good traditional way of doing sort of 3D models. So look, again, I'm going to just delete its history again, freeze its transforms, make sure the model's nice and clean. I'm going to draw a center line in it. I'm just going to do this using the multi-cut tool. It won't draw a complete center line because there's some triangles in it, but we can fill in the rest later on. So holding the control key down, but also the shift key to snap. Let's just get this as dead center as I can. Look, that looks about center, and I'll click. And it's drawn a fairly good center line, but I'm going to have to go and finish off some of the bits on it. So look, using the multi-cut tool, I need to link up this triangle here. So there, to there. I don't think has that done it? No, I think I clicked in the wrong place there. Let me just undo that. Let's try that again. Just got to be careful with this in case you suddenly start adding. There we go, that it liked it that time. And let's try and draw one all the way down here to the bottom. So I'm going to hold the shift key down here. And that holding the shift key snaps in increments along an edge. So if you get it right, which I haven't because you can see underneath the eave I've got a bit of a kink in it. It's I'm going to sort that out later on. I'll show you a way of snapping that one in line. But I think I've got a line all the way around my model now. Look, I've just got to do one here. I need a line across here. So let's draw another line in from there. Now hold the shift key down. Let's see if I get that right. Possibly a bit of a wobble in that as well. But I'll show you how to get this center line working nicely. So if I go into edge mode and I double click, and look, you can see it's selected that entire center line. So it is a neat line, and I think it goes all the way inside as well. So let's double check that. I can't see. Let's go into wireframe. Yeah, I can see that line is nice and neat all the way through. What I want to do now is, if I have a look at this in my front view, go to wireframe, you can see that there is that irregularity in that center line. I want to snap that in a nice neat line. So what I'm going to use, I'm going to use the grid snap to snap that in a nice neat line. But I need to check my options before I do that. So if I double click in my transform tool here and I look at my move snap settings, make sure this is turned off. I think by default it's always turned off. And what this will do is, if this is turned on, when you snap things, they will snap to grids or to relative to vertices, but multiple selections of vertices will keep their relative distance apart. It's a bit of a pain. I don't know why they have this by default on. I always turn it off. So look, I'm just going to turn the tools off, and I'll show you what it does. Look, if I move this line about, I can do it in vertex mode or in edge mode. If I now hold X down, make sure you're only snapping in this axis. Hold X down, and it snaps all in a nice neat line, like so. Okay. If you have that option off, that keep component spacing on, they will snap along, but they keep their distances apart, so they won't snap in a nice neat line. So we've got a nice neat line there, and that means that if I go back into object mode, I'm going to delete its history again, put it in shaded. I can then go into face mode, go to my front view, and I can just select near to the center line like this, but not over it, and I can just press delete, and I've halved my model. Okay, and that means that anything I do on this side now, eventually I can mirror this model across, and it will have those kind of things done on the other side. So let's mirror across. We're going to use in mesh, there is a mirror tool. There it is. We won't look at the option. We'll look at the on-screen display that comes on. You can see it's done a few weird things, so you have to be careful with this. So let's have a look. The merge threshold's too high. It's merging stuff together that I don't want to. So let's just drag this down. Look, instantly I've dragged it down to 1, and it seems to have resolved that weird merging. But my options are good. Now you might find your options are different, so just be wary. But cut geometry, I usually have that off. That can cause problems. So I usually turn that off, but everything else has actually worked really well. It won't always do the same for your own model, so play about with some of these things here. The offset will move the object apart and then together. So if it's set to 0, it will merge the thing exactly where it should be on the center line. The axis will set the way it mirrors across. So if I change this to like Y, it will look like it's got a reflection underneath. To Z, it should be forward and backwards, like so. So have a play about with some of these. The merge border, will make sure it merges this border edge here. Now I've got my border edges so they're visible. So if I turn this off to do not, you can see it goes to a thick line to show me there's a gap in the model. Well, not a gap, it just means that the vertices along that center line are not merged together. So there's two sets of vertices right on top of each other. So I'm going to put, bridge will just close any gaps with objects that are far apart, and merge will merge any verts that are on top of each other on that border edge. And so that's good. First thing you do after doing any kind of mirror or duplicate or combine is delete its history. Okay, because it creates like this is a poly mirror node, but a lot of things when you combine creates what's called a poly unite node. And it just means that in your hypergraph, if I have a look in my hypergraph, it will probably have created, I'd be hoping there's just one node in my scene at the moment, my house node. And bizarrely there is, but sometimes when you do poly unite, it has loads of nodes in here. So maybe they've cleaned that up a little bit. Okay, but I'm going to delete its history anyway. And it gets rid of that poly mirror history. There is some things that create lots of nodes. Like if I create a duplicate house, I'll try and demonstrate this to try and justify what I was just saying there. And I combine these two objects together using the combine tool. There you go. Look, it creates loads of nodes. Okay, and because I've combined these into what I think is one object, you'd think there'd just be one node. As soon as I delete history, look, it goes to one node. So it's the poly combine is the one that tends to create lots of history nodes. So always make sure you delete history afterwards. Now this is actually one object, although it looks like visually two separate objects. It's represented by one node. They're combined together. If I go into vertex mode, all the vertices appear for those two objects. Let me just undo that. So that was a bit of a digression. The poly mirror is obviously a little bit cleaner, but I would always delete history after doing certain tools like that. The last thing we'd do, I won't add loads of detail to this, I'll let you do that. I'm going to just add a few separate objects to this. So I'm going to add a couple of pillars in here and also some doors because I just want to show you how to sort of group these things together. So I'm going to create a cube, and this is going to be a pillar. And so I'll just scale this up. And you can model with separate objects and sort of just merge them together. It's not a problem doing that. You just have to be a little bit neat with them. I mean, rendering is usually pretty good these days, that any objects that are close together. So you can see I'm just being cautious here, just making sure these objects intersect cleanly. I don't want this too close to the top of the roof here. It might cause problems. So look, I'm just going into vertex mode. I'm putting those in so they're nicely sort of tucked into that polygon. If they're too close to the edge of something, they might flicker through. They might sort of appear through when you're further away from your object. So I'll go back to into object mode, and I'm just going to scale this down. This is going to just be a pillar. So I'm going to scale it down that way and that way, and I'll move it about like so. And I'll create another one of those. So Control D. I never copy and paste. I never use the hotkeys Control C and Control V in Maya. I always use Control D to duplicate. If you use Control C and Control V, it creates an additional group node on top of them, and it ends up just getting messy. So there's my two pillars. They're absolutely fine. I've made sure they're intersecting. If you want to be efficient, you can delete those faces off the top and the bottom of them. They're not doing anything. So, delete those away. This is me just being a bit old school. Efficiency, having worked on sort of old PlayStation 1 games, we used to make sure, so I'm in the wrong mode there, make sure everything that wasn't seen or used was deleted and hidden away. It just cleans things up. It reduces the memory hit by a tiny amount, not much these days. So there's some pillars. I could make them a bit more interesting. If I put a multi-cut in the middle of them using Control, I'll put one on that one, and I'll put one on this one as well. I could make them like a little bit bowed under the weight of the roof. So look, we've gone into vertex face mode. So I'm just going to move this slightly this way and slightly this way, and this one slightly that way and that way. And yeah, have a bit of fun with your model. Break it up a bit if you want to. Look, I might put a center line in here, like there. Like so, and it's just so, look, I can then, and if I just pick through this, I can just give it a little bit of sort of weight to it, a little bit of sagging in the eaves and stuff like that, so it just looks a bit more interesting. You make it a bit more sort of Tim Burton-esque if you want to, a bit more wobbly and skewed and so on. So it's quite nice to be able to do stuff like that. Again, just make sure you're picking through objects if you're trying to do the same to the other side. Again, like with this kind of canopy porch thing here, I might want it so it looks like it's slightly bowed under the weight, like where the pillars are supporting it. You could do the same with the doorway. I'll just be careful what I'm picking around the back of my object. I could just again just make the shape just a little bit more interesting. It just stops things being very sort of built on a grid. It's nice to build on a grid when you first start out to keep everything very nice and neat and organized. Helps with duplicating objects and stuff like that. It can also be good to keep everything very grid orientated before you start, until you texture, because it can help with the texturing side of things as well, to have everything uniform, and then go in and put the little sort of wobbles in and stuff like that. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to build some doors for it. I'm going to keep these very simple. Again, I'm just using a cube. I'm just going to flatten them like so and move them into position. So these are going to be kind of like saloon doors. Okay, so make them a little bit thinner. Like so. I'm going to keep them very simple. And just scale them down a little bit. So something like that. And I'll make another one, I'll duplicate that, Control D, and I'll move that across to there. So here are my saloon doors. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to move their pivot where I want them. So insert key, and I'm going to move, I'll snap their pivot. If I hold that down and hold the V key down again, I can snap it in line with that. Do the same for this one. Just the axis you want, hold the V key down and then drag over the vertex you want to snap it in line with. Like that. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to delete any history off those objects and freeze their transformation. And it means that now if I've got them both selected, I can make those saloon doors swing. Okay, and that's quite cool. And now basically what I've got now is I've got this object here, I've got my saloon doors and I've got my pillars, which could cause a problem. If I import this into my scene and then I say, oh, my house is too big, let's just scale it, this will happen. Everything's got pivots in a different place, so it all scales a bit horribly. There's another number of ways you can resolve this. The first thing I always do is make sure everything is frozen. If they had all their pivots in the same place, they would scale correctly, but you don't want the pivots of the doors to be in a different place. You want them to be there so you can animate them. So what we do, we group the whole object together, or we could create a controller object for it. So sometimes what I do is I create like a curve. So if you go to your curved shelf and just create a curve, you can't see anything at the moment. Go in the wireframe, you can see it. Scale it up like so. I'll just move it. No, that's fine. That's fine. We'll just have it here. And this will just be like a controller object. Once I've scaled it up, I'm just going to freeze its transformations like so and delete any history of it. It has like a shape node when it first is created. And then I'm just going to parent everything to it. So I'm going to pick my house. I'll just press Q to get rid of the manipulator tool. Hold Shift down and pick that, and that. So I've got everything selected, and I pick the circle thing last, and I press P. And it just means that now, like, if I press that, select that circle, look, I can move everything about in my scene. It all moves nicely. I can revolve it, anything I like, and I can scale it nice and neatly like so. And you're not actually scaling the individual things. You're just scaling this circle, and the building below it is responding to that. And I like creating these circle controllers because they're visible. The other way you can do it is if I just unparent this, I've just selected everything and press Shift P, and that means that I can just delete that. You can just pick everything like so and go to Edit and Group, and this creates a group node at the origin of your scene. And this is actually created at 0, 0, 0. For some reason I've moved this. Let me just move this back. Obviously I've moved my circle like so. So I've just undone that. Let me unparent it again. So Shift P. I'll pick that circle, delete it. I'll then group all these things together. Look, they've got some history on them, so let's get rid of that history and let's freeze that transform. So there's no history on any of these objects. That's good. I could name them as well. So Edit and Group, and that's done it. And then if I have a look in my outliner or my hypergraph, so if I bring up my outline over here, look, we've got this group node here, and underneath that group node is all my things to do with my house. So look, that's a pillar, doors, pillars, and then the main building. And if I pick that group node and I scale that group node, it works exactly like a circle. It's just that to pick the group node, you've got to go into your outliner. Well, you can pick it in other ways, but the best way is to go into your outliner or your hypergraph and select that group one, like so. I think that's all I need to show you. The last thing is if you are importing something into your scene, just save it, and you can then just go File, Import, and import the object into your scene. I would name them, and it just means that once you've imported it into your scene, find that group node or that circle controller, and then you can position it, scale it, and so on within your scene, and then you can still animate the items on it locally, like so. So hopefully that's a good way of starting to build scenery.